Hey, deserving listeners, this is part 3 in me reacting to the Raquel interview on Bethany Frankel's podcast. I want to remind everyone that I didn't realize until I'm recording this intro after I made this whole episode. I want to remind everyone that I didn't know there was a video version, so I ended up reacting to the audio version, which was posted on Sunshinery's YouTube channel. Let's listen.
Being that she's doing all of these deals and is America's sweetheart, and all these appearances and doing the talk show circuit and things like that.
Part of me says, good for you.
Good.
Because take advantage of these opportunities while they come your way. But it is hurtful to me just to think that my nature is very kind and forgiving and understanding of other people.
She said similar things along these lines previously. There's nothing wrong with Raquel wanting to acknowledge that she's not an evil human being the way that people think of her. But the way she frames it, you know, she says, like earlier, she said, when I watch the season, that's not me. And that's, I think, another reason why she might be calling herself Rachel now, because that's Raquel. The real Rachel wouldn't have done that. And there is some wisdom and utility in a healthy way to externalize that part of yourself that engaged in that. It's a technique in therapy. It's a narrative therapy. It's a postmodern technique, also kind of a cognitive technique where you will, for example, with addiction, for example, if you suffer from alcohol addiction, it can be helpful to externalize the drunk in you, is what people will call it sometimes. And that urge to drink is this outside force. It's not really you, because if you think it's you, then it's much harder to deny that, right? It's easier to deny something that feels external, even though it is internal, but you externalize it and say, well, the drunken me is trying to get me to drink today, but I'm going to tell that person no. I am going to say no to that because the real me is not a drinker. That can help. So maybe that's the Raquel thing, and that could help. However, she did do those things, and it wasn't like a mistake, which people will sometimes frame their infidelity as mistakes. It was, to them, it's like this one mistake that they made. It's not one mistake. It's thousands of actions that they had ample time to think about and evaluate, and yet they did the other thing. So yes, you aren't an evil person all the time. You're not constantly lying or deceiving, but you did do those things. And I feel like part of the healing process is acknowledging that you're capable of that you're a good person, but you're capable of doing bad things when you are in denial or selfish or suffering in some way. It doesn't justify, she's saying that she was suffering from a breakup, and I could see that being a major factor, but it doesn't justify it. It does provide a background, and it does give you a chance to know your vulnerability moving forward. But to just say that's not me, I don't do those kinds of things, I think would risk you not learning from history, because there's a good chance that a similar breeding ground for this behavior will occur for both Tom and, especially Tom. Tom's done it at least twice, if not multiple times. But for Raquel, we don't know about that track record. But if Raquel says, that's not me, and I don't need to consider that impulse or the factors that led to that justification in my mind, that need to do that kind of thing, then she might do it again, right? Plus, it's a very convenient narrative to have that, well, that wasn't really me, so thus I don't have to feel bad about what I did. And I get that if you're tremendously ashamed of what you did, but again, it's not diplomatic to say to them. But I can't imagine how angry Ariana or Ariana's friends or Ariana fans would have when they would hear this. I just can't imagine. Takes 3 to tango. My God. Maybe you can make an argument. Give us some data that justifies blaming Ariana for the affair. If the data is there, please present it. Otherwise, yikes.
Also, the concept of me being the ultimate reality TV villain just blows my mind. And
yeah, absolutely. Ariana has had an affair in the past, and at the reunion they talked about how I think all of them had affairs. So either they're all the ultimate villains, or none of them are. You could make an argument though that Tom Because it's not just the affair that is the transgression, it's the way he treated Ariana upon being caught with the affair. And, I hypothesized, not because I'm biased against Tom. I do care about him, and I do think that he's generally a good person, but he has issues. But the way that I saw, I'm biased towards all of them because we're all biased, but I don't feel like I am one of those individuals that just piles on negatively. But I will say that a strong hypothesis I had about Tom's crying whenever because he cried a few times on camera, and it looked legit. It looked like he was in pain, and the way that I think he was framing it was, I'm also a victim here, that kind of thing. And yeah, he has pain, and I think it's legit. But I think when he's crying, he's more focused on how he's been put upon. He's crying, I think, for himself, which we all do, and it's healthy to do that when the urge arises. But I don't think he was crying for Ariana or crying for the remorse about, feeling the remorse of like, oh my God, I can't, empathy. There wasn't evidence that he had. So you could argue that at least Tom, in terms of the revealing of character, the revealing of morality, that you could put Tom up there in terms of reality TV. I don't want to say villains, but I don't know any other word than to say like the yikes list. And I would put Raquel on that list. She's heading in that direction, though, because, I have, put upon myself this effort of trying to evaluate public apologies, and I make a lot of reaction videos along those lines and analyses. And I've come to learn that there's a pattern that was very exemplified by Bill Clinton. So when he sexually harassed an extremely young and vulnerable intern as the president of the United States in the Oval Office, and you could argue used his position of power to influence her and to string her along, that kind of thing. And, she was early 20s. Anyway, so when he was caught, he apologized, but it was very brief. And he talked a lot about how everyone was attacking him, but he did basically acknowledge that he did something wrong. Fast forward to the present day, and he is in an interview, and he basically, long story short, watch my reaction video because I actually show the clips. Recently, he was in an interview, and he basically indicated that he didn't have any remorse all these years later, which I think tells us that he showed remorse during the original public statements that he prepared, but he never really had remorse. Because if you really had remorse, 20 years later, 30 years later, you would have a narrative or a perspective or a way of talking that would acknowledge, you would probably have more remorse moving forward, Like for me, the things that I have done, the transgressions that I have committed, as the older I get, the more remorse I feel because I have more maturity and more differentiation. I have less of a likelihood to try to obscure what I did, even to myself, because I don't really need to. When you're in the moment, there's a lot of incentive to try to obscure things because you're usually scrambling to try to preserve. 30 years later, for me, those circumstances are long gone. Maybe the relationship is long gone. I don't have a need to go into denial about it. I can just sit with the negative side of it, and I just feel like, oh, that was like one of the things that I feel pain whenever I think about it was with my younger brother. I've 3 siblings. I was third, and then the fourth, my younger brother, and he is 6-7 years younger than me, and we played a lot together. And he always wanted to play with me. I was the older brother. I always wanted to play with my older siblings, so he always wanted to play with me. And we would play a lot. We would play Legos. We would make funny videos and that kind of stuff. And we would play sports. I felt like I was his trainer. I would try to make him into a good running back. He actually did become a good running back. We worked on a lot of fundamentals that I just kind of made up. And, we were close. And I was mean to him at times. I wouldn't say abusive, but I was short with him. I would snip at him and be like, oh, Kevin, that was so dumb or whatever. And there's some footage of it because we would make these videos, these funny videos, and there'd be these little moments where I would snap at him. And at the time, I felt like totally justified. No remorse at all. Fast forward 10 years, maybe I'd feel a little bad. Now, at the age of 52, it gives me so much pain, and I just feel so bad for my younger brother. And I have apologized to my younger brother in the last 10, 15 years multiple times. And he's annoyed at this point he's like, I think his position is he doesn't remember it, and it wasn't as bad as the way I paint it to be, and he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. And I have a good relationship with my younger brother. It's not like we're not distant. We're close. But if I feel progressive, I can't imagine how bad I'm going to feel at 62 when I look back. I can feel my heart break when I think about, because my little brother, he was so cute and innocent and nice, and he never did anything bad. And I'm just like, I just want to reach through the video camera and strangle myself. And I know some people get upset at me because I've said similar phrases about myself, and they'll be like, well, Kirk, that's upsetting because you don't want to abuse kids. And yeah, I'm not saying that someone should have strangled me. I'm just saying I'm just so angry at myself, and if I were there, I wouldn't have strangled me, but I would have taken me aside and been like, Kirk, I know you mean well, and it's great you're playing with your little brother, but sometimes you're a little harsh. And my parents would do that at times. So, I don't know. I was 13. I was still learning. So maybe taking it easy on myself, kind of, but I don't know. I just feel horrible. And I still have that within me. And I think that's part of the healthy side of this, is that, yes, when I was 13, I was extreme in that way in terms of relation to how I am now. But I still can snap at people. And I think holding on to that remorse and not beating myself up about it is helpful, because it will, remorse has a lot of function. It repairs relationships, but another function is that it reminds, that pain of like, oh, that remorse feeling, it locks in, or gives us the opportunity to lock in, when you do this, this is how it makes you feel. So avoid that behavior. Try to not do that. And as you have the impulse and that feeling of, oh, this is going to make me feel ashamed of myself or remorseful later on, maybe I shouldn't do that right now. It's a reason to not act. So it's another reason why, if you're Raquel, it might be more helpful to focus on the remorse and not make justifications, even if it feels accurate. I'm not convinced of, basically, maybe they'll get into it, but because they still live together, and because Ariana is continuing her business acumen in the world, that means it takes three to tango, and it releases Raquel, or at the very least implicates Ariana as an equal player. I'm just astonished at that point of view. I mean, the gymnastics are continuing. Hey, deserving listeners, today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes in life, we are faced with tough choices, and the path forward isn't always clear. And some of you might even be facing a tough choice right now. Well, for me, I like to fully explore all the options. That usually helps me to feel more confident moving forward. And sometimes it really helps to talk with someone and get their perspective and maybe their wisdom. And of course, therapy can help with this. I never planned on specializing in this area when I started out as a therapist, but over time, a lot of clients have come to me when they are facing tough choices that they're having a hard time figuring out what to do. Well, one option worth exploring is BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's worth giving a try. It's entirely online, it's designed to be convenient and suited to your schedule, and also you can switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. So, let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
The way that she spoke to me at the reunion, I feel like it was uncalled for.
It was too far.
Yeah.
Not a diplomatic thing to say if you're Ariana, but yeah, I felt that way too. At the same time, I can't imagine being in Ariana's shoes, but if you just take it out of context, if you just take the things that she was saying to Raquel, especially in that context, in the reunion, was really just taking it and saying, you're right, I am a piece of crap, that kind of thing. And Ariana was just going after her. Now, maybe Ariana knew that behind the scenes, Raquel was continuing to justify to herself. So Like paints a different picture for me. But yeah, if you take the statements in isolation, they were extreme and you could say uncalled for. And given the scenario, the infidelity, and especially given the way Tom was, justifying it and saying, well, when we had sex, you left your shirt on. I mean, just, you can imagine the pain and the anger that would emerge in you and the kinds of things that you would say, right? It was pretty normal and typical. In normal, typical life, you aren't forced to sit down for 12 hours in front of cameras with your former partner that cheated on you and the person and your former friend that also cheated on you, that, in terms of betraying you. You're not normally having to do that. You could argue in the first couple hours of that reunion, Ariana was holding it together. It was only later when she really started saying those things. So yeah, were they over the top? Yeah, but I don't blame Ariana. In fact, I can't imagine people having anything less than that reaction. Other people, it would have gone full Jerry Springer and there would have been fists thrown and weapons, or I don't know. So, that's just kind of how I see it. If I were there and I had control over things, I would have taken care of Ariana and be like, do you want to go? Because if you want to go, let's go. That's what I would have done. So, and then, Ariana can yell and scream with her friends and have those over the top kinds of statements, but they aren't in the presence of Raquel. So yeah. Now maybe Raquel will follow it up with, but I understand where she's coming from. Let's hear what she's.
It was uncalled for.
It was too far.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I think, and we're going to get into the reunion because that's where I really became invested in this as a concept. And I'm speechless about the reunion. But what I wanted to ask you was, is it more don't hate the player, hate the game? Like you don't blame all of the warriors like yourself who are there to get ratings and to kill people or be killed and to cheat and to drink and to have affairs and think it's real and normal because that's this landscape, but you blame the game. Mm-hmm. Is that how you feel?
I feel like I just got caught up in something that is way too big for me to handle, and I'm just trying to survive. So I don't know.
I'm confused, and I don't care to alleviate that confusion. But maybe I'll know what Bethany was talking about there with the hater in the game. I'm sure it's something that would be upsetting. So I'm just going to move forward. But Raquel says, I was caught up in something that I couldn't handle. You created a situation that you couldn't handle. You created the situation. You did the situation. Now, once the situation that you created by acting in thousands of different ways, you made thousands of decisions over the span of a number of months that you created something. Yeah, after it comes out, then it's a huge situation that is hard to handle. But you created it. You knew you were on reality TV. You're not that unintelligent. It doesn't take much IQ to put two and two together and say, well, I'm having an affair, which is really not great. Not only to, just do that, but also my friend and blah, blah, blah. I'm also on a reality television show while this is happening that's being filmed, and I'm going after it doesn't take much IQ to, and I'm not saying Raquel has a low IQ, I'm just saying that it's obvious. Now, I've talked about the mechanisms of justification and denial that we all engage in. I understand that, but once you have been yanked out of denial and justification, and especially after you've been through this wonderful inpatient treatment of love addiction, you would imagine that you would not continue that narrative that something happened to you. For me in my life, if people transgress upon me and harm me in some way, but they apologize sufficiently and have remorse and try to figure out how it affected me and try to make up for it and try to address the issues that led to that behavior, then we're good. Because for me, we all make mistakes, but it's about the recovery. It's about how do you act after the transgression. And for me, you can transgress upon me repeatedly if you apologize sufficiently. Now, someone said, well, I don't like people who do that because they just continually harm you and then apologize as if everything's going to be fine. Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is someone who legitimately is apologizing and trying to work on it. The kinds of problems that we have in our personalities and our behavior don't typically go away, even with a lot of good therapy. They just tend to be lessened. So for someone to transgress upon me that's close to me, in all likelihood, they're going to do it again. So this notion that it's never going to happen again is just too big of an expectation. But if the person can show me that they're working on it, that they feel bad, and I would like the same from my side, because I'm going to make the same mistakes that I've made in the past. I'm going to make them in the future. I'm working on it, and I would hope that people would be okay with the fact that we're all human beings and we're all making mistakes. So with Raquel, if she committed these transgressions that were in the thousands and was able to, once yanked out of denial, especially with treatment and time, was able to acknowledge at least 51% and show remorse and not continue in the justifications, then you're like, well, okay, we're good. If I were a friend of Raquel's, or I guess in a romantic relationship with Raquel, and this would be a thing actually for those of you. A lot of you asked me to talk about dating online and this, and I do talk about it sometimes, and I actually have helped a lot of clients with this issue, and it's multifaceted, of course. But one of the questions that people ask me is, how can you detect someone that is a healthy partner? Well, one of the things that you can assess for, I suppose, is the way they talk about previous transgressions in previous relationships. If they have all these justifications to themselves, like the way Raquel is exhibiting right now, then that's a red flag, because all the elements are present and are not being worked on consciously. When Raquel is calm, she's calm right now. She's not in the state of being attacked. So you would think that she would exhibit her true thoughts and processes. And if her true thoughts and processes are along the lines of what we've been hearing, then it would give me, as someone that was beginning a relationship with Raquel, no confidence that it wouldn't happen again. Let's see, how do I? Is that a double negative? I would be very worried that it was going to happen again, because what's stopping it from happening again? The only thing that can stop it from happening again is if she knows what she did and acknowledges what she did. She doesn't have to beat herself up, and she doesn't have to think she's an evil villain the way that everyone is painting her, but she does have to acknowledge that she made thousands of choices and she didn't just fall into a situation. She's not a victim. Now, she was, you could argue, victimized later on by the public unfairly, sure, but she's not a victim in the affair. She did those things. And so, if you ever date someone and they bring up something like this and they talk about it, it can be tempting and seductive, maybe, especially if you are trying to really believe the relationship is going to work, to be convinced of, you're dating someone and they talk about maybe a previous affair. They're just like, yeah, well, and they talk along these lines. Especially if you like the person, you might want to take on their narrative. But if you want to step outside of that and go like, okay, well, wait a second. What is this person saying? It would be a red flag. Does it indicate that the person is doomed or a terrible partner? No, but it would be worrisome. So, that's what I'm hearing from Raquel right now. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.